Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the AI Marketing Stacks podcast. And today I am here with the wonderful Alma Barranco, who is the CEO and co-founder of Infogenetica, which is a health company that's doing some really, really powerful things. And actually, some of the stories that I'll let Alma share regarding her family and her son and some of the breakthroughs they've been able to make in the health space are some really powerful stories. And what's really unique about them is that they all involve AI. So Alma has been using AI, studying it, using it in her business for decades. So well ahead of many people who just hopped on the bandwagon a little while ago. And I'm really delighted to have you here today, Alma.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. So can you tell me a little bit about the story behind Infogenetica, the company that you have now?
Yes, it's a very personal story because we developed the company because as a solution to my son's problem. He was diagnosed at 4 years old with very severe autism and ADHD. The prognosis they gave us was that he was never going to speak. He was never going to have any meaningful social interactions, pretty much was going to be a dependent all his life. So my husband, who is a medical research scientist and biotechnologist, he used to work at the time at the pharmaceutical industry, developing Alzheimer's medication. And when we started looking at my son's symptoms, we identified that some of these symptoms of very severe autism are similar to people with very advanced Alzheimer's. Like they have anxiety, they have difficulty concentrating, they cannot sleep, they are very anxious, they are irritable, have unexplained fears and things like that. So my husband used to work with fatty acids for brain research in general. All his career has been working on that. And we thought, well, maybe we can do this with some natural oils because we thought, well, let's be as natural as possible. Now, my background is in artificial intelligence. I have a Ph.D. in artificial intelligence. I have worked in many fields, but specifically in health informatics, developing medication and risk assessment systems and so on. So when he told me this, we decided, well, we can utilize AI to look at the different types of oil because there are like hundreds of oils, right? And some better than others. And the thing is that you hear about omegas, but that's just a very small part of the spectrum of fatty acids that your brain needs.
Mm.
So we look at hundreds of the different fatty acids and natural oils from vegetable sources and different fish oils and so on. And I developed an algorithm for AI, so machine learning and exploratory analysis, so that we look at the optimal configuration of these structures of oil so that they create a structure that was optimally absorbed by the human cell and would create a stability so that we prevent it from being like many of for example, fish oil. If you don't keep it in refrigeration, it goes bad very fast.
Mm-hmm.
When you put the entire spectrum of fatty acid in the optimal measure of the different oils, you create a stable compound that doesn't go bad. And you can keep it out of the fridge for up to 2 years. And we have laboratory tests that confirms that our product, neuroactive oil, can be stored in at room temperature without being requiring refrigeration. So we developed this formulation. I started taking it myself. So that was the first cool thing because, I had twins and I said I had twins and a lobotomy because my memory went from like almost perfect memory to like, if I don't write it, I don't remember.
Mm.
My memory came back. I was calmer. I could sleep. So we started giving it to my son. And long story short, my boy, who was told that he was going to be a complete dependent all his life, he is now 22. He just graduated from college last summer. He talks, he's independent. He's a little awkward. Like the autism didn't disappear, but the bad symptoms did, right?
Mm.
Like autism is a way of being. It's your brain how it processes information. And it's wonderful because he's incredibly creative. And those powers that autism gives you were masked by all these things that your brain wasn't able to process because fatty acids are needed for developing neurotransmitters like dopamine, epinephrine, and several others that your body needs to process that he's able to sleep, he's able to be happier in his life. So that's the story of the company. And when people started seeing my son's development, they told us, where can we get it? And they encouraged us to patent it. And, we got it Health Canada approved. And we've been in business for the last 10 years developing these products.
Yeah, I love that. That's such a powerful, impactful story. And it's such a powerful testament to what AI can do, right? When it's
Absolutely.
used in the right way, especially in the health sciences. And there's so many
Mhm.
amazing applications that can really transform people's lives.
Absolutely. And in fact, I use AI still in my business a lot because we are an online business, so we utilize it for a lot of our marketing, our distribution, finding representatives. So, we use tools, like I export to Mexico. So things like Grammarly and DeepL for translating, and things like that to be able to generate documents very quickly,
Mm,
efficiently, because even though Spanish is my mother tongue and I speak English, I lived away from Mexico, where is my originally where I was born, since I left when I was 19 years old.
mm,
So my Spanish is not business Spanish. So using AI to be able to like check my Spanish so that I don't sound like a 5-year-old. It's very, very helpful. And just generating content is
yes.
actually really wonderful because we generate articles, for example, but we want snippets. So tools, like, I don't know, Jasper and things like that, that help us to very quickly utilize our large scientific articles and, put them in a language that people can understand, that is digestible to the everyday person to understand our content. That's also very helpful.
Yeah, I love that. What are some of the other applications for AI that you see in business now? Obviously, you're in the health space, and an application like using the algorithm for the analytics, deep analytics, and the deep search is one. But what are some of the other applications that you see that businesses could adopt?
Yeah, well, I was the chief information officer at Trinity Western University and the Canadian Space Society. So I managed IT for everything. So AI is utilized very, very extensively, not only large organizations, but also small ones. For like analytics in terms to understanding your type of client. For example, with the university, we were able to analyze the type of student that was interested in attending the school. What was their profile, right? Like that,
Mm,
were they, students that were coming from the US or mostly Canadian? Are they, like what is this level of income that people attend to on their understanding and their interest? Because in the beauty about analytics is that you can dip into different pools and being able to bring in information that is not obvious to the human body. And it's one of the interesting things. When I used to teach AI, I used to tell my students there are two types of problems that people say a problem is hard, but a human hard problem is not the same as a computer hard problem.
mm,
So there are things that are very, very easy to us, like language or vision, because we were born with it. Like we just
mm,
do it automatically. We don't have to think about it. While those are really, really hard problems for computers.
mm,
Now we are becoming better, but a lot of the research that we did as computer scientists, I've been working on this field for like 25 years. So back then, we those algorithms, which are the ones that are being using right now, that so it's not a new problem. Like many of the algorithms that right now we're getting in the web, were developed a long, long time ago. We just didn't have the hardware. So that's the big innovation, right? Like hardware is so much faster. So
mm.
all those processing times that used to take us days to get results, now we do it in seconds.
Yeah.
So we can use it. And the amount of data. Like I used to do diagnostic systems, and for me, the difficulty was getting the data from the patients, right? Like I actually had to hire people to put in records because I would get it from the hospitals, and they enter the records for me to be able to do the analysis. But now we voluntarily fill out all these forms. So as businesses, your data is your gold, and the more data you have about the people that you work with and your customers and the type of market that you want to get to, the better you can target those messages. There are many tools doing analytics, that are fantastic to work with, right? So and they're very simple now and very, very accessible. And you can create these data lakes or data cubes, depending on the amount of data that you have, where you can find correlations. So for example, an example that I always have liked that comes from the retail industry is when people analyze that late night parents were going to buy diapers, especially fathers used to go. And when you look at the receipts, you see diapers and beer very commonly purchased at the same time. So they started to put the stack of diapers near the beer, and their purchases increased. So that's another way in which a business can start learning information, and then you are finding information that you didn't know.
Yes.
That is not obvious for us as humans, because very large amount of data is a hard human problem, but it's not for a computer.
Yes.
So those are easy type of problems for machines to be able to give you insight in your business and the type of the behavior that your customer is going to have. So
I think there's a lot in what you just said that's really, really valuable, right? And I think the mental model of there's hard human problems, but they're not hard problems for AI. I think that's the first one, and understanding the distinction and understanding, okay, like this may seem hard, like a really hard problem, but there's actually an easy solution, right? That's one. The other one that you mentioned is, data is the new gold. Like I think that's something that people who are kind of in the AI space, listening to podcasts, whatever, business owners, freelancers, I'm sure they've heard that before, right? Data is the new gold. So my follow-up question is going to be around that. But the other thing is, the last part I really liked about what you said is there's a lot of the interest in AI, especially in marketing spaces, come from the generative AI, right? Images, video, text, which is obviously insanely powerful. But some of the original use cases for AI, and still one of the most powerful ones, is in the predictive capacity for it, right? Which is exactly what you talked about, right? So being able to analyze large data sets and make predictions that, hey, when you put the diapers and the beers together, something that we never would have thought, right? That doesn't even make any sense, right? It almost seems a little bit backwards, but when you put those two together, now you can get an increase in prices, increase in efficiencies, all kinds of things. So I just wanted to tease those out because I think those are all really, really powerful points. And so my follow-up question is, if data is the new goal, how does like a small business, or let's say it's an agency, or some online company, or let's say you're a freelance marketer or whatever, how can you start to collect and gather more data, right? I know it depends on the specifics of the industry and the business, but what are some of the mental models or frameworks or tools or ways that people can go about thinking about how can I collect more data so I can ultimately use that?
Well, there are multiple ways, and as you mentioned, is domain specific, obviously. Many times, like freebies are great, right? So those type of tell me about you, I'll give you a white paper, or I offer you a 1 hour free seminar or something like that. That is a fantastic way of attracting people, right? Like, and it doesn't cost you much, like those things you can automate them. They're there. You don't even have to think about it. And there's data coming in. Some of the stuff, for example, like now more specialized type of things, like I run research. Research is my passion. So, for example, right now we're running a study on autistic people in Mexico, right? Like they're utilizing our product. So we donated some product on people who are like low resources that cannot afford the product. But in return, we're getting all this information because, I'm making questionnaires and they enter in. Just make sure that everything you do it with a form. and structure your data well.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's one of the big problems. Like, I remember when I used to work at the university and say, like, we want information is what, are you collecting the data? No. Or the data, for example, they would name fields for one thing, exactly the same thing for other purposes. So the cleanliness of your data is very, very crucial. And this is where you need to do planning. That's what do we want to know and how we structure our data. Because it's one of those things that people, love to use. I love to say, I'm going to use it for so many things, but they are not really being intentional in how are they gathering this information. So first of all, think what information is going to be useful to me, then create the mechanisms, because it's very easy, like to have the president of an organization as a CIO come and tell you, Alma, I want some dashboards. Okay, yeah, I can give you dashboards for whatever stupidness, but it's not going to be useful to you. You don't tell me what you need them for, right? So that's a very important thing. You need to understand what's your problem. And as an organization, that is the very, very first thing. And in fact, like, I do a lot of consulting work with companies precisely doing that, helping identify what is their objective, the real objective for their organization, and what are the key performance indicators for their organization that is going to enable them identify what are the data sets that they are going to need in order to be able to structure their databases and their data lakes and so on in a way that is going to be actually useful to them, and their goal is actually God, not Pyrite, right?
Right.
It's going to be very useful. So yeah, like questionnaires, like it may take a little longer, for example, to do a registration online than, like paper. Do it anyway. Creating, for example, doctor's offices and, like just a simple thing as having an online check-in. And, like when your client comes and, either the receptionist or the client themselves, just entering you invest a few $100s for a little screen on at the entrance of your office, and just register. That data is wonderful because, first of all, you don't have to enter it from all those paper forms. Is most likely you don't have the problem with understanding the handwriting of the person and things like that. So simple ways go a long, long, long way in terms of gathering and structuring data in a way that is usable for the machines to be able to get information and, find value. Because like it's wonderful to use AI for images design and so on. And yeah, that's the trendy thing. But the thing where you are actually gonna get the big bang for your bucks is in being able to utilize whatever data comes to your way into actually finding more about your client, what things makes them tick, how can you get more clients that way, because the fanciest image is not going to get you a client if you don't understand your right client.
Yeah. No, really powerful. Really powerful. So if I were to summarize that, it's understand what your problem is, right? Understand what your problem is. Start from the problem or start from either, the KPIs that you're optimizing for, whatever that is, right? Start with that and then make sure that you are intentional about how you structure the data. Do some of that work to start. And then the other one is be simple, right? You don't have to overcomplicate it. Focus on a few key data points. And then just like you said, use reciprocity, right? I give you something, you give me data. If you understand the value of data, you understand that it's a trade. And so setting up those points in your funnel, right, where you can swap information for freebies or goods is going to be really, really powerful. Yeah.
Another thing that is important to think about is security, as you mentioned, because as I said, data is gold, and it really is gold. And the challenge is now they're beginning to introduce more regulation, but at the same time, as businesses, we need to understand what that regulation is, because you can be sued by people if your data gets gone. And we've been seeing some multi-million type of settlements out there. So you want to be careful how you do that. So a lot of people, for example, were terrified about the cloud when it first came in. They say, oh, the cloud, oh my God, like it's so dangerous. I want to keep my data close to home. But the reality is that many of the providers, and of course, it has to be a reputable provider, they are safer to a certain, because that's their business. So they have the really expensive firewalls and anti-intrusion and procedures that are constantly checking the security, the perimeters, the physical security, and so on. But you have to be careful again. Who is a reputable? So when I work Canadian Space Society, really my job as the CIO, a lot of it was contract negotiator and reading contracts very, very, very carefully, making sure that our data was being protected effectively, who had ownership of the data, that we were not being collocated with other people because it was very restricted information, things like that it takes time, but is worth it to prevent a multi-million-dollar lawsuit, right?
Definitely. Yeah, nobody wants that.
Yeah, and understanding, because different countries have different regulations. For example, in Canada, health data, for example, cannot cross borders. So you say, oh yeah, I keep it, like Amazon Canada, but their backups are in Indonesia. You cannot do it there. So really go in depth and ask the hard questions to your providers. Where are your servers? Where is your backup? What are your processes that you follow? And really understand where the data is going and who's accessing that data. What are the safe checks mechanisms if the data goes down? Are they quickly recoverable? What if you go out of business? We had a situation in the university where we had a donor management system, which we spent a lot of money acquiring online. It was the top of the business, but it got acquired by their competitor, and the competitor shelved it. And so what happens, with our data? How can we gonna be able to, that investment that we put in establishing that software? So just because a company is providing you for a service right now doesn't mean that they're going to be there forever. So
Right.
always think of a backup plan for that information, because you don't want your data to go away. For example, if you're doing business in Europe, they have very strict regulations that the user actually has to be able to retrieve their own data if so they choose. So you have to be able to have ways in which the service that you use is able to retrieve all that data. Many services don't provide that. So you have to be aware that if you have European clients, you either have to restrict access to certain areas of your site or whatever, if you are using a third-party provider that is not structuring the data in a way that can be retrieved, or you have to create disclaimers so that they are acknowledging the fact that they know that their data is not going to be able to be retrieved, which is a law that people, especially in the US, don't think outside because many services are American. But,
Right.
this now is, I'm in Canada, I'm in Vancouver, you are in the US, we are talking. So many of the laws in Canada are different from that in America. So
Yes.
you have to be aware. Like, for example, Patriot Act doesn't exist here, but in the US, they can access, if it's determined to be for national security, they can access any data, even though your provider is saying that nobody is going to access that data.
Yep.
So we have to be aware of all these regulatory compliances when we are working with artificial intelligence. Which many small business owners don't think about at all,
Yeah.
because you're
No, I think
busy.
that's
So actually hiring consultants who are specialists in fields, it's actually worth the money, because again, you don't want to be going to a lawsuit eventually because some European client decides that they wanted the data, you cannot give it to them.
yeah. Yeah. No, it's an excellent reminder and definitely worth it. It's one of those things where uh it's one of those risks that doesn't feel as immediate, but when it hits you, you don't want to be on the other end of that. Um, Alma, is there anything else that you think would be valuable to listeners, who think curious about AI, the direction everything is going in, how to get a competitive edge in their marketing? Anything else or thoughts that come to mind that would benefit them?
Well, one thing is, don't be afraid of AI. Like, it's here to stay, right? Like, it's been around since Second World War. It's not new at all by any stretch of the imagination. Those of us who have been working on it, we've been thinking about it and working on, all the risks and things like that for a long time. So I know it's recently hitting the general public, but like, automated cars, self-driving cars have been in existence for 20 years. We just don't see it in the streets quite yet, but they are there already, and things like that. So it's here to stay. So don't be afraid. Educate yourself. Read about it, and just be aware that more and more businesses are using AI. We also, when we use AI, think about all kinds of people, because that's one of the challenges. And now we're beginning to be more aware with terms of equity, diversity, and inclusion. But many of the systems, for example, like those automatic machines, like in the bathrooms and so on, they used to not work for darker skin tones. So if you are developing solutions utilizing AI, be aware that there are biases. And it's not because people were intentionally selfish or racist or whatever, just because the data available was only available for a certain group of people. So it's an inherited bias. So be aware of those facts and don't take everything, at face value. Use your human brain, because these are the hard problems for machines. Machines don't know racism, don't know discrimination. Machines just use whatever data you give them to process it. That's it. And people who create the algorithms are the ones who put more knowledge into it. And and if they're not even thinking about it, like I think about it because I'm a Latina and I need to be aware. So most of my systems thought about that. But there are people who don't, right? Because it's not an issue for them. And not because they're intentionally racist, just because it's not a problem for them. They don't think about it. So more and more people are more aware. But as you consume data, again, a lot of your data is biased. So use your human brain when you read something that ChatGPT or one of those generative AI gives you. Be critical of it and say, okay, does this include other people besides the majority, common, Caucasian, middle class, American, right? Because most of the data is from America, right? Like, you have to think that there's a whole world out there, billions of people who are not meeting those characteristics. So
no, I think that's a great reminder that the tools are only as good as the data they're built on. And so be aware of that and keep that critical factor. Amazing. And where can people find out more about you, the work that you do, and kind of keep up to date?
Yes, well, my business, infogenetica.com. We're an online business. We can, get our products there, hear about us. I'm also on LinkedIn at Alma.Barranco. That's my profile. I'm always happy to meet new people and, have conversations. As I say, I do consulting services as well for corporations that are getting into data, into, technology and understanding themselves in relation to digital systems.
Awesome. Well, Alma, thank you so much. The work you're doing is awesome, and you shared a lot of wisdom today. And just thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join us.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Definitely.